Hello, welcome to the 2026 Disability Day of Mourning Virtual Vigil. My name is Nor Profess, and I'm your host. Today is the Disability Community Day of Mourning, when we come together to commemorate the lives of people with disabilities murdered by family members or caregivers. We call this fillicide. Please focus on remembering and respecting the lives of our community members lost to fillicide today. It's critically important to counter all forms of violence that disabled people face. Today, this event is for them. We ask that you follow our ground rules. We encourage you to use the chat to share thoughts or feelings if you would like. It's fine to talk about the people we are remembering and how ableism leads to fillicide, but we discourage people using the comments section as a way to argue with each other about what parts of that are more or less important, or sympathizing explicitly with the people who killed these people. This is a space to reflect and remember people who have passed and to share our feelings. Think of this like a funeral, because it is one. We have a moderator. Say hi in the chat, moderator. Before we read the names of those who have been added to the Disability Memorial in the last 10 years, we will read out killing words and share some words from our community members. Let me present to you a sequence of events. On March 6th, a 22-year-old autistic man named George Hodgins was murdered in Sunnyvale, California. His mother, Elizabeth, pulled out a gun, shot him point blank, and then killed herself. In the following days and weeks, journalists wrote about George Hodgins's murder. In their articles, they called him, quote, low functioning and high maintenance, unquote, and called Elizabeth Hodgins a devoted and loving mother. They sought out quotes from other parents of autistic children who normalized the crime by saying things like, every mother I know who has a child with special needs has a moment just like that. People came to comment on these articles. They said that they felt sympathy for the mother. They called her George's guardian angel. They said no one should judge her unless they had walked in her shoes. They said that it wasn't wrong because he was autistic, and autistic children are hell to raise. They said that it wasn't wrong because she was obviously responding to a lack of services. In fact, she had refused services. They said that it wasn't wrong because he was disabled, so his life couldn't have been very good anyway. On March 8th, Robert Latimer went on television to talk about how loving and compassionate it was when he gassed his disabled daughter, Tracy. He called for euthanasia, the murder of disabled children by their parents, to be legalized in Canada. A woman who appeared with him agreed. She has 2 disabled children whom she would like to kill, but she can't because it is against the law. No opposing viewpoints were presented. On March 17th, the Autism Society released a statement about the tragic story of Elizabeth Hodgins, which shows that high stress on parents is very common in the autism community. The statement, signed by both Autism Society presidents, blamed her actions on a lack of services. They also noted that the divorce rate among parents with a child with autism is as high as 70% due to the pressure. This is actually a myth that was debunked in 2010. They never even mentioned George's name. On March 31st, Patricia Corby drowned her 4-year-old autistic son Daniel in the bathtub in San Diego, California. We need to start looking at these murders as copycat crimes, which are encouraged when murders of disabled people receive positive press coverage. Just as Katie McCarran's murder followed autism every day, Daniel Corby's murder follows George Hodgins's murder, and subsequent media coverage which excused, explained away, or even promoted the murder of disabled people by our parents. When journalists call murderers loving and devoted parents, when television shows give Robert Latimer airtime, when parents normalize murder by saying that all special needs parents have murderous thoughts, the result is an environment in which these murders are seen as acceptable. Media coverage like this sends a message that homicide is a normal, understandable response to any discomfort one might experience when parenting a disabled child, and we can't pretend that other parents of disabled kids aren't hearing that message. Let me present to you a sequence of events. If you wrote an article about George Hodgins' murder, or if you gave a quote for one, or if you covered it on television, or if you blogged about it, or if you commented on it, and if you said that no one should judge the murder as wrong, if you said that Elizabeth Hodgins was driven to murder by George's autism or by lack of services, if you called the murder understandable, if you said it wasn't a murder, it was a mercy killing, if you said all parents of special needs children have felt this way, please take a minute to wonder if Patricia Corby heard you. First, ASAN's Executive Director Colin Killick will speak.
Today, we remember and honor members of our community who were murdered by family and caregivers. These autistic people and people with other disabilities were killed not for anything they had done, but simply for who they were, for existing in a place and time where their lives were not valued. These awful, senseless deaths did not happen in a vacuum, and they did not come out of nowhere. They happened because we live in a society that far too often fails to value people with disabilities, one that slashes funding for the supports we need to thrive while telling us on repeat that our lives are not worth living. They happened because of fear-mongering narratives that paint having a loved one with a disability as the worst thing that could happen to someone. They happen when those at the pinnacle of power tell the world that autistic people have been destroyed. To say that autism destroys people is to act as though we have been murdered already. In so doing, it absolves and encourages violence against us. No one would be charged with arson for igniting a building that had already burned down, with destruction of property for knocking down an already ruined house, or with murder for shooting a corpse. Saying that an autistic person has been destroyed is to treat them as no longer a person. And if society believes that someone is not a person, then it will not treat killing them as either a tragedy or a crime. To say that an autistic person has been destroyed is also an act of writing them off, of saying they are beyond help, beyond hope, and no longer worth spending resources on. Is it any wonder, then, that just as we are seeing violence against individuals, we are also seeing structural violence in the form of unprecedented cuts to the services that keep us independent and alive? We have not been destroyed. We are not wreckage to be removed or trash to be thrown away. We are people. And not only are those powerful voices calling us destroyed, they are also calling us destroyers. Autism, they claim, destroys families. In their mind, we are somehow both the rubble and the bomb. We constantly hear lies about how our existence makes others worse off. We are blamed for supposedly ending marriages, impeding careers, or diverting time and attention away from non-disabled siblings. Our mere existence is painted as causing harm. How dare we be born? How dare we breathe air and take up space? These powerful voices state outright that our families are worse off for us existing, that our loved ones would be better off without us. Why then is it any surprise when people act accordingly? Disabled people existing does not destroy families. Violence against disabled people by their own family members does. We do not cause harm by existing, and we do not apologize for having needs. The unofficial slogan of the eugenics movement was, "Some people are born to be a burden on the rest." What is filicide but eugenics at close range, an effort to bring about a world without us, one killing at a time? No one denies that it is difficult to be a caregiver for a disabled loved one, especially in an ableist society that does not value them. That does not make them a burden, and it certainly does not justify murdering them. The solution is not to value the lives of disabled people less, but to value them more. To value them more by expanding Medicaid funding, not cutting it. To value us more by making professional care and support well paid and easy to access. To value us more by making accessible, integrated housing abundant and affordable. To value us more by paying us fair wages, integrating us in classrooms, and refusing to use slurs that turn our existence into an insult. No one is too disabled to deserve love, respect, or safety, and no one is too disabled to have rights. People with disabilities are not asking to be harmed by daring to exist. We are here to affirm today, with every fiber of our being, that every disabled person's life is just as worth living as everyone else's. We are here to affirm that no one is a burden. We are here to affirm that the world is better off because it has us in it, and that we are not going anywhere. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dom Kelly, co-founder, president, and CEO of New Disabled South.
It's an honor to be with you today. My name is Dom Kelly. I'm the co-founder, president, and CEO of New Disabled South. I use he, him, and they, them pronouns, and I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia, on stolen Muskogee Creek land. Visual description: I'm a white man with dark brown curly hair, wearing a light blue button-down shirt and sitting in front of a purple wall featuring photos and posters and art, some plants, and a collection of books on a shelf. Today is Disability Day of Mourning, and today we remember disabled people whose lives were taken by those who are supposed to care for them. Every year we gather to read their names and remember their lives. And while the media portrays them as tragedies framed through someone else's pain, we honor them as human beings who became victims to ableism that is so prevalent in our society. Almost always when disabled people are murdered, the story centers their killer. We often hear about the stress of caregiving, the hardship, the burden on their supposed loved ones, but what gets erased is that a life was stolen, and as we all know, these lives were worth living. Disability is not a justification for violence. Disabled people's lives are not disposable and not less valuable. Our lives are not simply tragedies that are waiting to happen. And I'm always struck by just how many hundreds of people are memorialized every year. Those are just the ones we know about, just the ones that are reported, and the ones that someone here made sure were counted after the people who were supposed to care for them tried to have their memories erased. This day is about mourning, but it is also about telling the truth. We live in a world that still treats disabled people as problems to solve instead of human beings with support needs. Society underfunds home and community-based services, isolates families, fails to build care infrastructure, and teaches people in both subtle and not subtle ways that some lives are worth less. And unfortunately, those messages have deadly consequences. So today we're mourning the lives of people who were never given a chance to see a world where ableism no longer exists. And that should recommit us to do everything we possibly can to build that world where disabled people are safe, interdependence and community care are expected, everyone has their needs met, and where no one's life is treated as expendable. I'm honored to get to work toward building that world alongside each of you. Thank you so much for having me.
Our next speaker is Katie Nees, CEO of the ARC.
Hi, I'm Katie Nees, Chief Executive Officer of the ARC of the United States. Today is a day we should have never had to create. It exists because disabled people have been killed by their own family members and caregivers, and because disability is too often treated as the reason that this violence makes sense. These deaths are framed differently. They're explained away. That difference puts disabled people's lives at risk. Thank you to the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network for holding this vigil and for insisting that these lives be remembered with dignity. Filicide is often described as a tragedy, but its violence is rooted in how disability is misunderstood and devalued. It reflects a failure to recognize people with disabilities as full human beings whose lives are worth living. We return year after year because this violence continues. These deaths are heartbreaking. They are also unacceptable. Too often, the story is told in a way that centers the caregiver and erases the person who was killed. The language softens, the focus shifts. Disability becomes an explanation, even an excuse. This framing teaches society that some lives count less, and that belief puts people with disabilities in danger. At the ARC, we see this thinking everywhere, in the return of the R word, in jokes, headlines, and comments that treat disability as something shameful or unbearable, in systems that fail families and then respond to violence with surprise instead of accountability. None of this happens in isolation. It reflects whose lives are protected and whose lives are not. Today is about mourning and responsibility. Responsibility to challenge these narratives wherever they appear. Responsibility to build systems that support families without sacrificing the lives of people with disabilities. Responsibility to say clearly that violence against people with disabilities is never understandable. To people with disabilities watching this, know this: your life matters. You are not a burden. You belong here. To everyone else, I hope you'll join the ARC and the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network and so many others in demanding a future where filicide is named for what it is, where disabled lives are defended without apology, and where mourning is no longer an annual ritual. Thank you for allowing the ARC to be part of this day of remembrance.
Finally, our last speaker is a member of ASAN's team who is a survivor of a filicide attempt.
About 20 years ago, I left the house I grew up in with nothing but a laundry bag full of some clothes and some books and a ride from a friend to the town where I would attend university. I was an IVF baby of the late 80s. My mother wanted a child so badly that my parents wiped out their savings in order to conceive me after 7 years of trying on their own. She wanted a baby, but she didn't want me. When she was in one of her better moods, she would tell me how good I was when I was very young, how I never cried, how I taught myself to read when I was 2, how I spent hours alone drawing and didn't need supervision. But when I started preschool and couldn't speak out loud in class, I did speak at home. I believe she saw it as an assault on her character. She was a speech therapist and her child was selectively mute. Then it reflected badly on her that people noticed that I never had eyelashes because one of my stims at that time was pulling them out. I didn't love her because I never looked at her directly, because I screamed when she tried to hug me. Growing up, except for school, I was confined to the basement because I wasn't normal and didn't deserve friends. I was allowed upstairs for meals and to go to sleep. I honestly didn't mind it much. I spent my time reading and drawing, and my mother was generally only awake at night, except for when she appeared suddenly and without warning, like a sad and violent apparition, to caterwaul at me and chase me around the house for some unknowable rule I had broken. I knew each creak on every stair, floorboard and door jamb, and avoided them so as not to wake her, so as not to exist. But on one particular day, I accidentally woke her, which made her livid, and to punish me, she started ripping up my drawings, and I had a meltdown. She strangled me while she sat on top of my chest. My father must have pulled her off of me, but all I remember is seeing him in the doorway, watching before I passed out. I was 12, and this was just the first time she tried to kill me. She tried to relieve herself of me more times than I can count. Once, when I was 16, she forced me to overdose on the antipsychotics and Xanax that I had been prescribed to calm me down when my meltdowns became more disruptive during puberty. And when my father found me, he brought me to the hospital, where they involuntarily admitted me to the psychiatric ward for being a danger to myself. You don't ever fully survive filicide, even if you live. For all of my early life and into my adulthood, I was suicidal, and in the moments where I wanted to live, I tried to kill off core parts of myself that did not fit into the sanitized narrative of normalcy in order for my body to survive. I cannot express how deep my gratitude is for disabled community. I credit my continued survival to disabled found family and the passion I found for disability justice in my 30s. Despite using it here, I actually hate the word survivor. I hate the idea that the person from before the violence still exists. I have been 1,000 people, each replaced by another reborn out of necessity. I do not want to be a Matryoshka doll growing ever larger to contain all of my former shattered selves. I want to be allowed to be whole. I want a world where it is safe for me to be whole. I want a world where disabled people are not murdered for simply existing. And I'm grasping for words to name those whose bodies still exist, but for whom calling them survivors is an act of violence in and of itself. Children confined to institutions, disabled adults with no option except to live with abusive caretakers, every disabled person barely making it through each day because being on SSDI means living in forced poverty, Black disabled people who experience such drastically increased rates of death at the hands of the state that survival is so deeply precarious that the word has lost its meaning. So not only am I mourning the hundreds of disabled people who have been murdered at the hands of family members who were supposed to love them, but also at the hands of doctors and the police and ICE, and I am mourning the fact that every single living disabled person exists in proximity to violence. And I hope, for all of us, that one day in a liberated world, we will have safety and softness instead of simply survival.
Thank you to this year's speakers for sharing their words and their stories. We will now listen to the recording of names.
Sorry business is a set of traditions and ceremonies followed by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people regarding the loss of a loved one. Sorry business includes the practice of not using the deceased person's name. We want to respect and honor this custom. There is no standard period of time for sorry business, as it is based on the grieving period of the family and friends. For victims who are Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, we will look for the person's wishes, and if that is not available, mirror the language that Australian Aboriginal groups are using. If there are no sources from Australian Aboriginal groups, we will use the same wording as local news sources. Bertha Coombs, Philip Maynard, Eunice Fury, unknown male. Samantha Kelly, Sophia Mahaffey, Harmony Carsey, Holly Lozon, Irene Carter, Dwight Carrington Ridley Sr., Adeline Mosman, Digby Dowdle, Carolyn Torino, Daniel Joost, James Hill, Maddox Lawrence, Michael First, Deborah Harris, Henry Mokoshoni, Jeffrey Rack, Rebecca Cutler, Jessica Cunningham, Desmond Hudson Jr., Holly Jeffcoat, Priscilla Edwards, Nancy Parker, Ethan Okula, Ezra Miller, Tamra Turpin, Dawn Green, unknown female, Morella Guth, Ronald McCabe, Cynthia Bush, Seth Johnson, Mary Pally, Roberta Rubinski, Kobe Shaw, Kenneth Nix, Kazue Karazura, Luciana Torcello, Bethany Rachelle Johnson, Tony Myhand, Kathy Evans, Yusei Akita, Inaya Ahmed, unknown male, Adrian Parmana, Linda Chestone, Whitney Chalumfa, Masano Yao, Yutaka Nagao, Enelese Mikata, Patricia Myers, Lorraine Rayner, Emily Perrin, Maria Bronco, Jack May, Barbara Kavanaugh, Melissa Couture, Patricia Gordon, Marie Stempinski, Cecilia Madre, Casey McDermott, Jasmine Walker, Venkatesh, Gertrude Sigman, Ruby Knox, Carolyn Hager, Ava Cole, Jose Castillo Cisneros, Henry Sochowski, unknown female, unknown male, Leslie Den, Elsie Scully Hicks, unknown male, Amir Ross, Leonard Asikias, Noemi Villarreal, Catherine Ash, Billy Joe Quintier, Peggy Sinclair, Kira Friedman, Charlene Norris, Rietje Wilms, Tamara Keelam, Kimberly Stern, Jean Irwin, Cedric Page, Yuki Kawashima, unknown male, Ty Lee, Jordan Burling, Shaylin Lohano Stone, Mason Bryan, Tyson Clark Robertson, Nancy Wright, William Lamar, Nadia Scheibel, Patricia Kearney, Jeffrey A. Kittredge II, Lydia Whitford, Charlotte Hart, Claire Hart, Kaushal Pawar, Janelle Johnson, Miradula, Rifat Mohammed, Margaret Meyer, Catherine Purcell, Elizabeth Wilms, Madalena Pavisi, Margaret Sanford, Princeton Holloway, Tyler Caudill, Theron Leonard, Benjamin Mitchell, Angel Alicia Estrada, Barbara Getman, Margaret Shelton, Mindy Speck, Ernestine Tyndall, Jonathan Aguilar, Jean Constant, Austin Anderson, Leslie Ramirez, Ronald Bettig, Gerald Son, John Zidane, unknown female, Earl Coleman, Henry Wilson, Shabana Kunath, Stephanie McGeo, Adam Snyder, Mohammed Wahab, Sarah Jubai, Elisa Manrique Lutz, Martin Manrique Lutz, Maria Lutz, Alaya Taylor, Mark Mellor, Vicky Below, Masako Hirahara, Grace Packer, Andreas Headland, Mohammed Abdullah, Harold Nolan, Natalie Finn, Margaret Fleming, unknown male, Lanitola Espinisa, Janice Frescura, Robin Frescura, Patricia Diane Swink, Henrietta Belcher, Carol Simon, Robert Welburn, Brayson Price, Braden Otto, Isaac Ward, Andrea Spina, Devendra Prasad Misra, Sue Liner, Faith Wilson, Sharon Greenup, Rebecca Pierce, John Owings, Chance Vanderpool,
Robert Libby, Reba DeWild, Natasha Wild, Albert Weaver Sr., Tavon Williamson, Danny Fernandez, Aidan Agmanalis, Phyllis Mansfield, Catherine Breen, Sonia Riong, Teresa Smothers, unknown female, 96-year-old woman, Yoko Kubota, Patricia Mulder, Mercedes Witterman, Perlene Bode, Ellen McKenzie, Rebecca Benight, Peter Abrams, Barbara Martone, Alex Santiago, Miss Song, Marilyn Miller, Irene McLean, Scott McCallum, Karen Allen, Victoria Cherry, Michael Guzman, Aaron Lineweber, Jose Gomez, Rahim Khatun, Amirul, James Smith, Samuel Merle, Joseph Bishop, Matthew Tirado, Feng Shukying, Tina Billingham, Sanaa Cunningham, Robert Jones, Cameron Hoopengarner, Erwin Drake, Prakash Singh, Shobha Singh, Jocelyn Lizotte, Charles Singer, Brandon Strauss, Avis Addison, Walter Clark, Moti Sahu, Kanchana, Ruth Bain, Jaylyn Keith, Pamela Crespi, Jeffrey Franklin, Nicholas Dean, Noah Campbell, Amber Perry, Rafilwe Monamodi, Troymaine Johnson, Chiaki Kino, Jalandia Butler, Wilma Paletti, Judson Duncan, Samantha Link, Abby Spear, Radhamani, Reka Balolia, Manubai Bujad, Kente Williams, Estelle Swanson, Helen Dancy, Laxmi Naidu, Walter Brown Jr., Sarah Jane Gatt, Lorraine Smith, Sabrina Ray, Lovedeep Singh, Gail Caulfield, Devarian Davis, Rollis Bowman, Herline Narosa, Kathy Smith, Lee Muyi, Murray Upshaw, Yoshiaki Tamakeo, Carrie Whitley, Brianna Gussert, Nancy Gleisinger, Unknown Woman, Lam Mekam, Grant Heckman, Johnny Irvin, Shirley Irvin, Sandra Nichols, Shakira Hicks, Arifal Islam, Edgar Carbajal, Mahalakshmi, Henry Johnson Jr., Colton Johnson, James Walker, Angelina Costello, Halak, Peggy Schroeder, Liana Twiss, Omar Omran, Micah Gee, Olivia Gee, Virginia Villa, Jonathan Crabtree, Olivia Cray, Dadirai Mashanga, Pernell Robinson, Nauko Kopp, Shannon Cooper, Oslem Karakok, Child D, Margaret Sims, Savannah Leckie, Unknown Female, Ursula Cabalzar, Donita Elliott, Leah Cohen, Vivian Nelson, Rukia, Shirley Williamson, Marion Reynolds, Aishika Sarkar, Hideko Mizutani, Matthew Dunbar, Dominique, Howard Quick, Hui Yi Tong, Courtney Turney, Anne-Marie Lawler-Boardman, Joe Pooley, Jesus Hibbard, Kyoji Hattori, Jayashriban Nathwani, Unknown Male, Kiara LaSalle, Sarthak, Varad, Chatia Wongthong, Rihanna Griwacheski, Swarna Kapoor, Antonio DeStasio, Vanessa Danielson, Beverly Nickerson, Julia Whitmore, Shirley Thompson, Kaylee Lise Lalonde, Valerie Wallach, Caden McGinnis, Elizabeth Lackey, Frank Lackey, Summer Peace, Sana Iqbal, Richard Dubuque, Jane Sargent, Nicole Beelman, Jaya Pichamuthu, Olivia Cart, Yuk Kawailu, William Dubois, Masako Kumada, David Paco, Sharon Matthews, Charity DePina, Carolyn Croucher, Kayla Hensley, Jimmy Anglin, William Brownlee Sr., Dylan Davis, Wade Denton, Megan Scully, Mason Bloom, Ruby Wilson, Marcia Nejebauer, Elba Monroig, James Tuning, Katie Kearns, Noe Valencia Hernandez, Kendall Chick, Bruce Clayton, Mariah Woods, Sunil Kotele, Irie Kakimoto, Johnny McFadden, Jordan Rodriguez, Unknown Male, Luke Dawson, Aubrey Dawson, Michael Sharon, Irene Strant, Logan Christie, Fabiola Cosme Feliciano, Malu Debbie, James Murphy, Kathleen West, Sumiko Kobayashi, Unknown Female, Paola Manchisi, Brahm Debbie, Kakoli Das, Nancy Barclay, Adeline Hill, Patricia Todd, Jeanette Brown, Christina Broden, Lorene Hopkins Pequignot, Name Unknown, Name Unknown, Belladonna Loke, Levi Ilingayok, Zoe Whitford, Yoshi Kanuchi, Kun Boon Khan, Aki Imai, Barbara Wilms, Akira Uwashitomi, Motomu Nomaguchi, Lise Sparks, Cynthia Brunner, Daniel Stort, Jada Wright, Lorraine Bush, Name Unknown, Andrea Bartlett, Fial Melvin, Jesse Wilson, Douglas Fisher, Samvith, Dinesh Sharma, Chang Tinhin, Susao Okuda, Aurelia Castillo, Cody Nachtrab, Kaylina Anderson, Leo McWilliams, Austin Steele, Patricia Gottlieb, Ronivia O'Neill, Joe Daniels, Josephine Long, Franz Pitjeng, John W. Nichols, Betty Lyons, Shashank Reddy, Adeep Reddy, Sharon Wood, Kathleen White Grandgroth, Destiny Roller, Susan Gibson, Daniel Gibson, Amanda Zrini, Abraham Cardenas, Nikki Widger, David Parton, Judith Howe, LeBron Rankin, Omera Akinloba, Denise Rosser, Name Unknown, Sumitra, Philip White, Mary Smith, Wilson Ross, Bernadette Green, Heaven Watkins, Antoine Hawes Jr., Name Unknown, Shafali Samantha, Tay Cockman, Rylan Cockman, Ari Cockman, Caden Cockman, Tyler Talmadge, Aiden Talmadge, Christopher Kenneth Bosselman, Joshua Alonzo, Pearlie Lee Williams, Schwan Schwan, Jahira Daniels, Sharon McCleary, Anjun Ja, Hayat Bibi, May Kim Lin, Bertha McGill, Chloe Hobbs, Peggy Pettis, Mary Gregory, Shriyana Reddy, Vishnuvardhan Reddy, Comfort Thompson Peen, Elsie Green, Wendy Henson, Samantha Fraser, Carolyn Campbell, Janice Garrett, Vanessa Comer, Ernest Starry, Emma Bingaman, Helen Smith, Laurel Bentley Barham, Barbara Lewis Brown, Dawn Liebig, Jacob Edwards, Patricia Franks, Bonnie Hanks, Muhammad Rabiul, Ronald Blankenship, Mason Jordan, Anne DeLucia, Mary White, Sharmila Debbie, Stephanie Packman, Mildred Heed, Warren Raymond Jr., Mustafa Mematalio Galari, George Blair, Jonathan Schmoyer, E.C. Gabrielson, Evelyn Bailey, Mary Terry, Jalen Goldsboro, Dante Mulini, Logan Starling, Stacy Hunsucker, Zamira Dominguez, Mark Randolph, Kelly Barber, Gina Rico, Linda Sweat, Irma Reese, Miss He, Yu Soo Kim, Shuji Sanada, Shobha Kulkarni, Sadhana Muniswaran, Florence Gerard, Samantha Tash, Christiane Belzile, Michelle Bucalo, Michael Keane, Kyoko Naito, Hiroki Naito, Patricia Way, Syra Harrison, name unknown, Emily Hampshire, Anne Pomfret, June Knight, Sheila Small, Frank Novak, Yulia Nezhikovskaya, John Likeness, Baby Boy, Delaney Manning, Rebecca Ballinger, Kayla Mirsky, Francis King, Stephen Henriksen, Julie Neifel, Elvis Dry, Sharon McManus, Keith Theriot, Chet Charnick, Willie Moore, Sudesh Gupta, Heidi Winchester, Amory Martin, Anita Arias, Donna Featherstone, Tina Stimmel, Jeanne Wilkerson, George Rusnak, Julie Burdett, Chun Lee, Teresa Bagwell, Mia Edmondson, Evelyn Scott, Mary Fitzgerald, Donald Collins, Kiyoshi Suzukawa, Kylie Willis, Rebecca Fogel, Maria Stiles, Harish, Santosh, Kazuno Sueda, Linny Everett, Kashaya P., Jahir Gibbons, Jeanette Dunbavand, Ashlyn Ellis, name unknown, Vivek Kakadia, Tika Young, Sam Coates, Ronald Williams, Harry Jones, Heidi R., Lauren Griffiths, name unknown, Martina Avila, Dunaluktmi Naidu, Jaden Webb, Jordan Webb, Alexandra Jacobs, Paula Meadows, Sarah Dubois-Gilbeau, AJ Freund, Robbie Ballinger, Duke Flores, Stephen Ehrig, name unknown, Penny Clark, Gwendolyn Tomlinson, Esther Wavinia, Sachio Uzue, Mavis Long, Stephen May, Melissa Pierce, Zayden J. Nasakua, Bin La, name unknown, Darlene Conger, Ichiro Kumazawa, Wilma Melkert, Betty Cruz, Shabana, Alma Shaber, Desmond Wooding, Valerie Valdez, Kayla Kunkel, Brian Hagenes, Ashamati, Kushal, Name unknown. Marjorie Arnett, Gail Camarota, Lucas Castillo, Sayamala, Ari Ace, Maya Ace, John Savage, Kyoko Atsuka, Noah Tomlin, Brenda Venables, Sheila Murray, Deborah Leitch, Malachi Lawson, Patricia Whitney Jones, Christina Pangalangan, Holly Bahadur, Vanessa Mayfield, Victor Villa, Amy Wynn, Adam Schneider, Barbara Walsh, Jakey Toole, Amzin Shaw, Gail Baumea, Sandra Schaefer, Joel Parks, John Robinson, D.H., Skylee Carmack, Hector Pizarro, Jamie Ray Feeden, Connor Snyder, Dinah Durham, Jeanette Lewis, Charles Sartine, Aiko Matsubara, Dorothy Davis, Terry Lynn Thompson, Jacqueline Jolene, Gabrielle Michaelis Ciffoni, Mildred Costanza, Teru Nakata, Hiroshi Nori, Hide Fukaya, Nicola Stevenson, Kyrell Matthews, Harmony Montgomery, Ana Vasquez Rodriguez, Elmer Norris, Sotaro Ogata, Sophia Hamid, Shinobu Kishimoto, Yoshio Kishimoto, Takio Kishimoto, Sharon Felleman, Joyce Jody, Donna Harris, Patrick Callahan, Shirley Brewer, Isaac Guelin, Jessica Dalgish, Ram Kokar, Maud Amjad, Harialal, Masako Ikawa, Sayoko Inada, Isaac Torrijos, Angela Tarver, Ishanth, Jordan Barrera, Rosalia Garofalo, Henki Naude, Dustin Baggett, Samantha Roberts, James Tate, Thomas Valva, Megan Tote, Tracy Hamby, Gerald Walton, Malaya Harden, Makisha Maynard, Derek Kristoff, Noeline Ann Marinovich, Chaba Kuri, Masatoshi Chiba, Marvat Gergis, David Alsop, Heather Wagoner, Grace Kaldenberg, Princess Chapman, Rajan Kushwaha, Michiko Hayashi, Shoko Takahashi, Mitsuo Oshima, Josias Marquez, Sirshendu Malik, Asma Akhtar, Kathy Erbelding, Rhonda Stahikar, Gladys Ambert, Damian Scott, Ruth Brown, Carolyn Mosley Walker, Umesh Balagi, Gulshan Ali, name unknown, Alejandro Ripley, India Martin, Isabel Rosen, name unknown, Willow Dunn, name unknown, Abigail Humes, Louise Smith, name unknown, Uthra, name unknown, Cheryl Martin, Waylon Mittens, JJ Ballo, Diana Rosalie, Esteban Harless, Penelope Harless, Abiel Harless, Apollo Harless, April Zavala, Emmy Yamamoto, Billy Hobson, Kylie Mickens, Kylie Larson, Frederick Johnson, Arthur Labinho Hughes, Jack Crowell, Eileen Myers, Pauline Brown, Ryu Sakayama, Lamarian Tummer, Clara Wright, Nicole Jekubek, Thaddeus Saran, Sarah Curran, Eduardo Jose, Kelly Ray Woods, John Miller III, Dylan Freeman, Cherith Vanderploeg, Leslie Hartman, Angela N. Name unknown. Shanti. Donna Harbor. Abhijit Rajak. Yoko Shinya. Fatlung Wang. Nancy Arnold. Name unknown. Pauline Langford. Emric Osuna. Name unknown. Cameron Joseph Gordon. Kaylee Titford. Nicholas Colatrea. Anadina Sok. Cadence Langley. Name unknown. R. Devaraju. Adrian White. Saeed Nelson. Mahalakshmi. Shannon Lloyd. David Almond. Timothy Gramlich. Homer Piat. Callie Branch. Thomas Greedle. William Smithson. Eric Smithson. Jamarian Delancey. Vincent Avellino. Charles Chandler. Joseph Hammond. Carrion Walter Franks. Larry Hanks. Name unknown. Saburo Sato. Miss Sue. Name unknown. Name unknown. Mr. Mukai. Joan Wheeler. Michael Montgomery. Chadaporn Kamkya. Sonam. Manu Savalia. Akram Shudari. Hezekiah Pettiford. Felicity May Harvey. Connie Hunt. Genevieve Adiange. Travis Scott. Guadalupe Martinez. Teru Inaba. Ikanthakari. Nanako Tokutani. Jerome Brown. Helen Miller. Robin Beaver. Jasmine Kennedy. Shavana Fox. Peter Kwakwas. Jamal Anderson Jr. Naomi Kaneko. Suresh Mangal. Name unknown. Dalbert Edwards. Jax Ponomarenko. Kayla Estevez. John Miklausik. Name unknown. Tam. Melissa Hinton Miller. Lordy Ramadan. Name unknown. Wendy Cole. Jordan Brooks. Margarita Sandoval. Darren Henson. Liam Husted. Brian Cotter. Raheem Sahik. Name unknown. Lori Detheridge. Janet Kotopka. Ayan Shaikh. Jalin McConney. Winifred Grover. Shannon Zeal. Joseph Barney. Alaya Artis. Surmakani. Name unknown. Ikadashi Swain. Joyce Jeffries. Mark Pagan. Jasmine Singletary. Prasanna. Zoe Schaefer. Elsie Pinder. Shuji Sugisawa. Kaysteen Blackseer. Chelsea Hill. Connor Hill. Rudransh Shankar. Devansh Shankar. Name unknown. Ramon Castellano de Torres. Louis Lujan. Mason Weston. Name unknown. Wayne Leworthy. Moy Chan. Mohammed Mukhtar. Harrison Loudon. Hindai Ndigurwa. Harvey Borington. Jamie Now. Maria Huerta. Bernice Durbin. Name unknown. Richard B. Wicks Jr. Kyle Tayo. Gabby Petito. James Richard Lewis. Najir Deal. Name unknown. James Westcott. Violet Walcott. Summer Night Tatum. Hendrik Lee. Anthony Bronner. Felicity Kreb. Barrett Kreb. Don Walker. Jacob Ardanya. Jane Stone. Catherine Jones. Yoshihito Ohashi. Yoshio Ohashi. Nicole Amari Hall. Salisu Surakatu. Kara Broyles. Uday Sai. Danya Fields. Natalie Ryan Fraser. William Fitzhugh. Maura Flores. Rocky Linzalone. Name unknown. Name unknown. Svetlana Shiryeva, Janice Hunter, Ranjiv Kumar, Paramjit Singh, Ashton Yap, Ethan Yap, Mandy Noe, Lacey Fletcher, Aileen V. Tootie Schrader, Brenda Rains, Jamie Garcia III, Jasbir Kaur, Kamaljit Kaur, Toyoko Amano, Amir Tabarzan, Melvin Weller, Briuk Paquet, Jason Wilkie, Zorea Dixon, Briley Clino, Edward Kessler, Gopi Chand, Catherine Newhouse, name unknown, Rosemary Webster, Thomas Conley, Trayshawn Brown, Garija, Helen Lowry, Megumi Yamada, Mr. Chen, Stephen Earle, Heather Baynard, Richard Rutherford, Biley Cowell, M.E., name unknown, Gertie Duncan, Harvey Baker, Kalaikal Ramjini, Sharon Mook, Jamie Ward, Carla Jacobs, Eli Hart, Sarah Latimer, Braylon Hines, name unknown, Pankaj, Kimberly Bridges, Hannah, King Dewey, John Hoover, name unknown, Donna Mayfield, Joanne Harris, Leela Gopalan, Luis Benitez, Zeus Cox, Catherine Sokolich, Amelia Gregory, Timothy Ferguson, Gabrielle Rowe, Annette Boyle, Prakash Thakur, Gulabi Kirketta, Eleonora Bernard, Dominic Landon Paddock Wood, Chanel Colquhoun, Kadaris Maddox, Michael Mickey Ober Logston, Adam Cortez, Tejaswini, name unknown, Driti Balakrishna, Patricia Martinez, Joanna Parker, Barbara Wilshire, Miss Say, Amora Lou Milburn, name unknown, Yatming Lai, Jonathan Runyon, Ernest Sena Sr., Sandeep, Andrea Suertas, Federico Mendez, Joshua Jurek, Louise Nash, name unknown, Bernadette Stedman, Lisa Stedman, Matthew Stedman, Hayden Garefa, Hunter Drew, Kanan Kuti, Mae Brown, Shanice Watts, Teruko Fujiwara, name unknown, Patrice Johnson, Vincent Roebuck, Alice Matheny, Shivama, Milagros Martin, Edwin Collison, 67-year-old female, Josiah Green, 14-year-old girl, 4-year-old girl, Yu Haoqing, Athena Brownfield, Aria Smith, 6-year-old girl, Caleb Bogan, Mary Fisher, Megan Fricks, Skylar Wilson, Waleed, Lucas Chambron, Nadine Richards, Omari Varela, Cecily Kurtz, Sheila, name unknown, Megan Tillman, Leon Hignite, Shane D'Onofrio, Melvin Mackey, Christopher Pratt, Ben Thompson, Anthony Mitchell, James Samuels, Janet Samuels, Lachesta Shasta Childs, Lindeva Rosario, Lola James, Karen Gillen, Gopi, Timothy Ragas, Edith Pierce, Mark Vea, Bobby Laws, Robin Grogan, Sarah McKetty, Yasushi Yamamoto, Nellie Sullivan, Nosifo Mufana, Jack Ross, Morgan Moore, Joan Folks, Jackson Morrow, Vaishnavi Patian, Chase Allen, Pamela Gordon, Leon Appler, Stephen Shaper, Mary Chirella, Patricia Bitters, Mary Kelting, name unknown, Michael Bruno, Madeline Day, Barbara Reeder, Sandra Brown, Jesse Pickle, Antonio Tatasciore, Cora Lashkowitz, Yoshiko Gano, Trish Lamborn, Cecina Damiani, Rajender Kumar, Sarah Albone, Caleb Gonzalez, Rosa Hargrave, Jenny Baxter, Rashta, Yusuf Firat, Mesut Firat, Juanita Cox, Ruth McLaren, Sarah Bateman, Amale G, Abhijit Jaibe, Janice Houston, E. Balava, Cameron Forrest, Rashta, Hashi Som, Gary Liu, Grace Kennard, Jeremiah Puskak, Eliana Gonzalez, Junan Fannel, Ray Cramond, name unknown, Lugela Morales, Shanna McLean, Anaya Perry, Olivia Hobbs Jordan, Lech, Mahesh, Sinwan Bunkerd, Omri Bloom, Patricia Zaccario, Parambuliu Thankamani, Felicita May St. John, Dana Morris, Lawrence Brown, Cheryl Lee Manzoff, Therese Brassard Levesque, Jean Ann Salter, Logan Halstead, Ahmad and Ava Jackson, Ethan Ortiz Ruiz, Amanpreet Al-Subaihi, Armin Mayo and Michael Willett, Elizabeth DeRozan Clay, Victoria, Nur Fatin Modsani, Vivian Kefauver, Leon Perkins, Mohan Lal, Srinivasan, 10-month-old girl, JMGC, Jean Morley, name unknown, Ada Lynn Carr, Eileen Pierce, Baba Jr., Dorothy Davis, Sophie Prefau, Brittany Ward, Gwen Michelin, Lillian Walsh, Frances Kelly, Sydney Montia, Vanita Nowell, Sophie, Deepak Kumar, Jonathan Lambert, Tiffany Lazon, unknown woman, Terrence Terry Adams, Elizabeth Vamplew, Carmody Faith Hobe, Tiffany Schulten, Zeta Faith Johnson, Kaisha Lene Price, Greta Zaba, Braden Aaron Butcher, Robert Fish, George Singleton, Anna Asensio, 5-year-old boy, Emma Malone, Skylar Pettit, Arditi Bekteshi, Michael Parks Jr., John McCullough, Lois McCullough, Brandon Story, Eli Riggin, Chari Watkins, unknown male, Henri Diarnac, Maureen Potter, George Kantanka, Gianna Kantanka, Deontay Atwell, Gianna Bradley, Paul Lavery, Christiana Blake, James Gaylor, Jeanette Beecraft, Shrikesh Halloy, David Hernandez, William Anderson Jr., Jeremiah Moore, Amy Lynn Maudrow, Noah Landon, Lawanda Mitchell, Oleode Morinike, Paula Lombardo, Edward Chang, Hannah Mathura, Aston Starkey, Baby Chawan, Nayali Perez, Carolyn Key, Paul Mann, Cheryl Seitz, Jeremy Hall Thompson, Indrajit Pathak, Mr. Chan, Dimple Mina, Kinsley James, Ellen Alice Wiggs, Kathrikuti, Komotso Mose, Priyanka Narsaya, Unknown Man, Devasya Kumbukal, Sonia Parker, Max Oilak, Unknown Woman, Pritika Venkatesh, Woman in her 70s, Ella Carrig, Thierry Cardrown, Jimmy Lamar Cardwell, Arshad Shaikh, Narayana Humaira Rosli, Consuelo Gonzalez, Davi Nandalal, Laney Edwards, Elijah Anthony Hale, Neetu Sharma, Nikki Sharma, Niru Sharma, Nidhi Sharma, Tylim Hatchett, Carmel McDougall, Donna L. Kitzmiller, Unknown Female, Barbara Bobby Brandt, Chris Knox, DJ McCollum, 89-year-old woman, Malka Semenduyeva, Phyllis Walburn, Tegan Fredericks, Lalita Dubey, Joyce Gaskins, Barbara Ann Conroy, Esther Nakakande, Florence Albert, Gail, Kushi, Princeton Nicholas Jones, Selena Kellum, Louise Wilda Greenway Llewellyn, Laureata Mangwa, Addison Rebecca Carr, Kul Acharya, Jijas Vijayan, Anupriya Kumar, Jaden Dixon, Melanie Granados, Katarina Witten, Diane Glaske, Helen K. Witter,
Nathan Quesada Fernandez, Anthony Mitchell, Sharada Shukla, Shante Unique Glenn, Elaine Whitman, Unknown Elder Man, Titus Davenport, Christopher Snyder, Unknown Man, Linda Zamarripa, James Sterling, Lavon Hoff, Benjamin Murphy, Jean Hosing, Johnny Thomas, Secret Curtis, 14-year-old girl, 43-year-old man, 70-year-old woman, 8-year-old girl, Arshish and Ashish Reddy, Christian Padilla, Karen Poutler, Patricia Kachinko, Ralph R.J. Taylor III, 1-year-old boy, Renesmee Yutzi, Vladimir, Unknown Man, Thomas Clubb, Teresa Sutton, Johannes Vincent, Beverly Joan McElrath, 77-year-old woman. Kingsley Welty, Desmond Thorpe, unknown man. Taryn Mason O'Sullivan, Jose Luis Moreno, Anu Kumar, Brian Vasquez, Cecilia Cross, Ryan Long, unknown elder man. Qase Noor Khalesha Rosa Iskandar, 12-year-old boy, unknown elder woman. Zain Rayyan Abdul Mateen, Lincoln Button, 80-year-old woman. Anita Dominic Cuvier, Samantha Elizabeth Dean, Noor Izati Ghazali, Deanne Blanchard, Ronnie Cradle Campbell Sr., Gilbert Balter, Robert J. Francis, Lanine Ray Lonnie Rogers, Elizabeth Strauss, Sarah Harris, Alex, unknown last name.
Lindy Kimmy Lucena, Lily Sapp, Louis Moina Massaquoi Jr., Andrew Jordan Criado, Aurora Elizabeth Criado, Elijah Jordan Criado, Isaac Jordan Criado, Tabasha Rochelle Tabby Page Criado, Reagan Moon, 84-year-old woman, Kristen Rutherford, Anka Pop, 6-year-old boy, Arlinda Taylor, Ayla Mangan, Kaylee Ann Renee Lindsay, Chandrasan Ramteki, Herschel Creechbaum, Hope McGrath, Kylie Clark, Muruganatham L, Aisha Amanu, Asimwe Navath, 9-year-old girl, Akiri Bell, Cosby Dean, Danielle Crosby Davidson, Esteban Coelho, Jacob Michael Casey, Kamachi Naikar, Phoebe Bishop, Unknown Baby, George Howson, Marjorie Joanne Galliner, Margaret Maxine Karar, Abu Jabate, Fatumata Jabate, Ivy Allen, Unknown Man, Emma Finch, Vinod Kumar, Gloria Tapia, Harihar Sahu, Logan Shippey, Omana, Sidra, Noel Rodriguez Alvarez, Aurora Grace Hurst, Giselle Glover, Anjana Kumari, Archana Malesham, Diane Searcy, Unknown Elderly Woman, Vicky Below, Q Lam, Ana Gutierrez Sedano, Ella Kadoth Ramani, Elliot Perez, Jackson J. Rantala, Jonathan Kinman, Catherine Willems, S.B. Sean Brasfeld.
Tomac Nath. Unknown elder woman. Unknown man. Age 60s. Yashodabai Patil. Carolyn Irene Trimble Weber. Dennis Recker. Evan O'Connor. Rebecca Pies. Renesmee Utsi. Reese Anthony Cameron. Stephen Robinson. Baby M. Maru Ganantham, son of Lingaswamy. Name unknown. Age 3. Fry Herdman. Rebecca Jean Ann Pierce. Stella Hamilton. Larry Lawton. Stephen Nunn. Santo Cosa. McQuan X. Jones. 21-year-old woman. Kathy Pinkowski. Matina Hosanna. Amy Jo Nelson Smith. 7-month-old girl. Giovanni Isaiah. Alyssa Renee Sandifer. Mercury Liggins. Ariane Johnson. Christy Himes. Tiana Kirchner. Lily Griffin. Mariah Alvarez. 10-year-old girl. Delilah Villegas. 5-year-old boy. Gary Lehmeyer. Daryl Smith. Daniel Garza. Manju Mahanto. Alice Anene. Velma Kuntz. Unknown man, age 50s. Unknown woman, age 80s. Joe Marvin Foster. Carolyn Kreutzer. Susan Sean McCoy. Tomislav Nemes. Winter Elizabeth Rose Acorn. Patricia Patty Hawking. Marcy Babul. Cleo Ann Loizides. Nawal Ben Alam. Inez Laziza Ben Alam. Giovanni Dal. Serenella Mugnai. Zadie Buggy Kiohoho. Ashley May McConaughey. Dane Timms. Mark Randall Howard.
Thank you for sitting with us tonight as we honor those who have been lost to filicide. We will now have a moment of silence. Thank you. This is always a really difficult and emotional time for our community. I recognize that it takes a lot to remember those we have lost. Thank you for doing that with us. We're now going to do a reading of You Get Proud by Practicing by Laura Hershey. If you are not proud for who you are, for what you say, for how you look, if every time you stop to think of yourself, you do not see yourself glowing with golden light, do not, therefore, give up on yourself. You can get proud. You do not need a better body, a purer spirit, or a PhD to be proud. You do not need a lot of money, a handsome boyfriend, or a nice car. You do not need to be able to walk or see or hear or use big, complicated words or do any of those things that you just can't do to be proud. A caseworker cannot make you proud, or a doctor. You only need more practice. You get proud by practicing. There are many, many ways to get proud. You can try riding a horse or skiing on one leg or playing guitar and do well or not so well and be glad you tried either way. You can show something you've made to someone you respect and be happy with it no matter what they say. You can say what you think, though you know other people do not think the same way, and you can keep saying it even if they tell you you are crazy. You can add your voice all night to the voices of 150 others in a circle around a jailhouse where your brothers and sisters are being held for blocking buses with no lifts, or you can be one of the ones inside the jailhouse, knowing of the circle outside. You can speak your love to a friend without fear. You can find someone who will listen to you without judging you or doubting you or being afraid of you, and let you hear yourself perhaps for the very first time. These are all ways of getting proud. None of them are easy, but all of them are possible. You can do all of these things, or just one of them again and again. You get proud by practicing. Power makes you proud, and power comes in many fine forms, supple and rich as butterfly wings. It is music when you practice opening your mouth and liking what you hear because it is the sound of your own true voice. It is sunlight when you practice seeing strength and beauty in everyone, including yourself. It is dance when you practice knowing that what you do and the way you do it is the right way for you and cannot be called wrong. All these hold more power than weapons or money or lies. All these practices bring power, and power makes you proud. You get proud by practicing. Remember, you weren't the one who made you ashamed, but you are the one who can make you proud. Just practice. Practice until you get proud, and once you are proud, keep practicing so you won't forget. You get proud by practicing. As a reminder, please do take care of yourself following the vigil. That looks different for different people. For some of us, it looks like stimming or drinking water. For some of us, it might be a nap. Do what feels right for you. We will now end the virtual vigil. Thank you for attending. Take care of yourselves, and have a good night.